He's angry about mortgages. It's Angry Mortgage. He's swearing. He's cursing loud. He's old. He's opinionated. And he's been doing this so damn long. This program is about mortgages, and this is mortgage advice, but the advice may not apply to your situation. Contact licensed mortgage professionals for specific recommendations before you make decisions about mortgages. You may not agree with Ron, but if you don't, he thinks you're wrong. Oh, and did we say there is a lot of swearing?
Well, we are back with what we've had a series of spectacular guests, and bigger and better again today. Ben Rabidoux. Ben, it's North Cove is your advisory service for, I think that's on the equity side and the sell. Is it a buy side, sell side?
Yeah, it's an
advisory?
institutional research firm. So
Yep.
I work with people, big firms in the U.S., Canada, around the world.
Yeah, and it's real, folks. Like I'm know of it. Okay, and you have real estate. Say it's Real Estate Edge.
Edge Realty Analytics.
Edge Realty Analytics. Okay, I knew there was an edge. Okay,
Yep.
Edge Realty Analytics. And listen, if you're a real estate brokerage owner or you're a mortgage brokerage owner, and you're not subscribing to Ben's service, you are nuts. Okay, you are in the wrong. You are behind. Like I'm 68 years old, and when he opened it up to subscription, I think I was there the first day. Okay, if you want to see the best charts. And what does every customer want to see? They want to see a chart, right? Mm-hmm. You have the best charts. Some are released, some are not, right? Mm-hmm. It's the best.
No, I appreciate that, Ron. Yeah, we try to take the institutional quality research and then make it accessible to folks in the real estate space. And so you get the reports, but you also get these kind of needed. We got a team that does marketing infographics, and so some people find that pretty useful. Just touch points for clients and stuff.
Seriously, if you are in the real estate business or in the mortgage business, you got to subscribe. This sounds like just relentless shelling, but the truth is, the insights are real. Like we're going to get to one soon, but the insights into what's really going on, like cut through the noise, cut through the bullshit, the real thing that's important for the future. Ben's got it. But first of all, we're going to talk about something that's he and I would say it's sort of near and dear to our hearts, but the dear is not the right word.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We talk about the incredible and horrible story of Fortress Real Development.
Yep.
So I think you were there first. So I'll let you start off.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's
how it happened.
Yeah. So maybe just for real quick background, it's a company that would raise funds from retail investors, mom and pops, ostensibly to fund the soft costs on development projects. And so they raised on the order of $925 million from Canadians across the country. To date, there are roughly $420 million in crystallized losses. There's a bunch more that are still working their way through the insolvency filing or the whole restructuring process. So there will be additional losses. We don't know what the final tally will be, but it's a lot. And what was
huge?
Oh, it's huge. It's
Jesus,
huge.
Yeah.
So they came onto my radar in 2013, just to give you a sense of how slowly the wheels of justice turn. 2013, and I mean, I think you and I both recognized pretty quickly the math didn't math. Right?
I think I was 2014. You were ahead by a year.
Okay, but you knew there was something that didn't fully compute. You knew what they were paying for referrals because they raised a lot of funds through the mortgage broker channel. 100%. And so they would pay very hefty referral fees and then guaranteeing a certain percentage to the investors. And so, you kind of knew early on that there was something that didn't quite seem right. The advertising just felt like it was off. There was a lot of words like safe and guaranteed, and you'd see this floating around and it's just like, there was just something that felt off. So I posted a few kind of pretty innocuous questions on Twitter, just like, hey, can you explain this to me? Why are you using the word safe? Why are you using the word guaranteed? How are you getting 8% guaranteed in a zero rate world? And very quickly started getting hit with all these threatening legal letters, which right away puts your alarm bell. Like, what are you trying to hide? Right? It's one of those, you protest too much. But in that process, having kind of put out my skepticism on Twitter, That was back when Twitter was great and it wasn't full of bots and all sorts of crazy shit. And
because it was Twitter then.
It was Twitter then.
Because we're X now.
Right.
Okay, yeah,
right.
We're X. Yeah.
It's always Twitter to me. But you know, you throw something out there and all of a sudden people start feeding you information, right? Including investors saying, hey, yeah, I invest with these guys. Here's the documents I signed. Here's what they were. So you start gathering information. So fast forward, I got sued from them in 2015 alleging defamation.
Defamation, right.
Yep, which is I think was where you and I originally connected because I reached out to you. I knew that you had been warning about them as well, to your credit, and you know, so I end up in this lengthy, protracted legal battle with these idiots. The judges dismiss it as a gag proceeding. They're like, "This is a bullshit lawsuit."
So you had a slap counter suit,
correct?
Which is by the way, for the listeners and viewers, just so you know, Canada has crazy fucking stupid defamation laws, okay? Like it basically allows anybody to sue you for defamation at the drop of a hat.
Yep.
Okay, they didn't like what you said about anything, we're going to litigate you. And for those of you who have not been involved in litigation, this is what you need to understand. If you don't defend, you're fucked. You got no choice but to hire a lawyer because they serve you with a statement of claim. If you don't defend vigorously, they will get a summary judgment, they'll get a default judgment, and you will owe them $300,000 or $1 million, okay? So you have to defend, and then you're in an infinite shittery of legal fees.
Yep.
Okay?
You're lighting money on fire.
You're lighting money on fire daily because there is no cheap litigator. It does not exist. There's no cheap litigator. And you will just burn through money. The only good thing in Canada that we have about these easy defamation, libel, slander laws, the laws that favor the liars, really. The only good thing we have is SLAP. So SLAP is something where you can say, nope, you are just lying. You are a liar, and you're doing this litigation just to shut me up.
Correct.
Okay, and you go finish up. You won. You won the suit.
I did, and actually, that was the first major test of that SLAP. It was a brand new.
It was brand new law.
It was a precedent-setting law. Yeah. So it was dismissed under that law, and in the appeal, the judge actually kind of slapped them and said, no pun intended, but literally kind of was like, look, this is a bullshit lawsuit. This is the actual wording was a strong indicia of a true slap. So like for a judge to say that to a lawyer, basically being like, why would you ever even bring this?
Just so we can get this out there because it's public record. The lawyers involved defending Fortress Real Development were at the time, and I think maybe still are, they were the biggest law firm on planet Earth. It was Norton Rose.
Correct.
And the inimitable Jennifer Teskey.
Yep.
So to follow up on my side of it, I said essentially identically the same things on X. I said, the math ain't mathin'. Like, you know, traditionally in the mortgage space, a large lender, particularly this type of lender, the most they would ever pay you to find a mortgage investor, the most you would ever see is about 0.5% as a referral fee. So that's like $1 million, you get $5,000. Okay. These guys were paying 8%.
Yep.
So they were paying a 16 times multiple of whatever anybody ever paid in history. And many don't pay anything. Many say, you go charge a brokerage fee if you want to do a private mortgage. So I knew the math was just crazy. Like, this makes no sense. Where are you getting the money to pay 8%? Because in a traditional mortgage, the investor is supposed to be getting all of the interest income.
Yep.
And maybe the MIC is the Mortgage Investment Corporation is developing a small cut. So they're doing some administration. They might be making 8%. They might be making 1.5%. They might be making a little bit of money on the side in terms of NSF fees and other administrative costs. But these guys were like rich. Like they were paying 8% referral fees. They were advertising like they were Loblaws. They would put on black tie dinners. They would have ma and pa investors, like people who many of these people did not really have a great grasp of English. Okay, that's a percentage of them did not have a great grasp of English. They were, and then the real madness happened when financial advisors were getting cuts of this 8% to then funnel interested prospects working in another language to the mortgage broker. Then it turns out there's 4 mortgage brokerages sprung up like mushrooms, and they were all funded by Fortress Development. This never happened. This had never happened before in history. Had a lender opened mortgage brokerages.
Yep.
Never happened. So there was like 12 red flags. I mean, we've just covered a few.
I mean, it just keeps going, Ron. Like, so as soon as I started digging in, you realize, wait a minute, there was some court records that came out fairly early that showed that they were taking, in some cases, 30% of the money raised up front as their fee. So imagine you invest $100, just to use a round number, $30 off the top goes to Fortress.
No wonder you can pay 8%.
Right? So it's insane. And so that wasn't being disclosed. Then we started pulling land registry documents, and you would see that they would close on a parcel of land one day, let's say for $10 million. The next day, they were registering $30 to $40 million of liens against it, but representing to their investors that, this is a really safe loan because we're only loaning up to 70% of the value of the land. So if anything goes wrong, we'll just take the land back, we'll sell it, we'll get your money back, which was
false. It was totally bullshit, because what they were really doing is doing a calculation based on the fantasy of final value of building a condominium complex or building a series of townhouses or building whatever they were building. They were actually doing opinions of value, of future value.
That's right. They were basically saying, if we get the maximum density that we're applying for, because they haven't even put their applications in many cases. If we get the maximum density, if we hit all of our pre-sale targets in the time we expect, if we, X, Y, Z, if we get all these things lined up and everything goes perfectly, this will be the final profit. And so therefore, that's the value of the land. That's kind of how they backed into this bullshit. But that meant that if something went wrong with the project early on, the collateral was the actual value of the land as it was.
The dirt, yeah.
Yeah, and that was a fraction of what they had lent against it. And so that's what we discovered. And then, look, it goes on and on. The two guys that founded it, Jawad Rathor, Vince Petroza, both sanctioned by the OSC for their role in a pump and dump scheme, which was a really egregious...
One was banned for life, I think, from mutual fund. Yeah,
that's right. So then Jawad was also banned from the Mutual Fund Dealer Association for life for a separate infraction. So you've got guys that have serial infractions related to questionable behavior with investor money.
Well, big regulatory stop signs, huge regulatory stop signs. Okay.
Which I know then gets into the question of how were these guys ever able to raise considerable amounts of money from folks in the mortgage space? Where was the mortgage regulator? And I guess that's where I'd kick it back to you, because I know you were very front and center trying to raise the flags with the regulator.
I approached the mortgage regulator on 4 separate occasions. The chief of market conduct, a guy by the name of Anatole Monet, I approached him personally on 4 separate occasions, several phone calls. And I said to him, this is serious fraud going on. This is all going to end in tears. There's going to be massive losses. These guys are complete crooks. And I got different stories at different times. I'm talking one-to-one in a meeting, like we're looking at each other. And it changed over the years. It was like, well, we've seen no indication of that. Then another meeting where, well, look, I mean, we have brought them in. This is wild. We had brought them in, and they brought in 6 lawyers. And they brought in 30 boxes of files into the meeting. No bullshit. This is like the most classic, like, red flag. You're being pushed around. Like, if you go, at one point I said to him, like, you realize if you go to the FBI's website that shows all the flags for fraud, these guys are running about 6 out of 8.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. All affinity, language groups, friends and family, exorbitant entertainment, like these black tie dinners. Like, there's literally is no mortgage investment corporation has ever had a black tie dinner except them. Okay. Nobody's invited their investors to these magnificent parties. And none of these people who run these MICs have floor seats at the Raptors games.
You're right.
Like front row floor seats at the Raptors games. Okay.
Flying private jets.
All that stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So, so then eventually it progressed over the years as the rumor mill flew, and a lot of it's thanks to you. Like, when I published this stuff, the inimitable Jennifer Teskey would send me lawyer letters. Yep. And unlike you, who had the guts to fight, I would just apologize and take the tweet down. Okay, because it was a long time ago. I didn't have the resources I have today. Today I am fighting. Like, I just finished spending $70,000 on another. I spent $28,000 on crazy Harold the mortgage closer, who's now banned for life. That was a lawsuit for $28,000. So I've started spending my share of this bullshit. Okay, but you had the guts to really go to the wall with them. And they lost magnificently. Did you ever get any money out of them?
Very little. So, I mean, I have a judgment against him. So, it ended up being 6 figures. Like 6 figures in legal fees goes really quickly, as you know.
Yeah. Sure.
So you get into multiple 6 figures pretty quick. So I've got a judgment against them. But what people don't realize, everyone seems to think that like once you have a judgment where the court says, you owe this person that much, it's like the court then goes out and enforces it and makes them pay. But it doesn't work that way. It means now you have to go try to find the assets and collect on them.
Because good luck with a garnishment order.
Right. It's
somehow they're not getting paid anything. Sometimes they're just
right.
They're there, but they don't really work there. Okay,
yeah. No, that's it. So the short answer is I've gotten a little bit off a couple of kind of lucky fines, but very little. So whatever. It's burnt money, but I feel at the end of the day it was worth it. And I guess to close that circle, what ended up eventually happening, and actually I should say, on your point about Fisco, there ended up being a great investigative piece. I think it was the Financial Times, Matt something.
Okay.
And I remember working with him. I mean, Ron, we're talking a decade ago, so some of the details are a little fuzzy, but I remember working with him. And he went through Freedom of Information to get a bunch of the Fisco documents related to this. Mm-hmm. It's a great read for anyone who wants to if you just Google Fisco, Financial Times, Fortress, it'll come up. And he found all these crazy internal emails of people literally saying, look, if we're not here to shut down guys like this, what are we doing?
One particular woman put her job on the line and said, these guys are dirty, so why aren't we moving forward? At the very end stage, knowing how bad it was going to be, Anatole Mon told me, well, nothing I can do now. It's in the finance minister's hands. Okay, so it became, it was endless washing. It was washing of hands. It's too much for us. And yet every sign was there. So you're right. Close the circle.
Well, I'll finish what happened at my end. So then when they sued me, I thought, well, it finally gave me the motivation. I had just reams of information because I had investors reaching out to me at this point. There was a lawyer who did some great work on this, David Franklin, who was pretty dog on a bone type, and he had dug up some good stuff. So we all collaborated, and I'm fairly good at explaining stuff, so I was able to lay out a pretty comprehensive report that I submitted to the RCMP. It's actually pinned on my Twitter profile for anyone who wants to see exactly what was submitted. And that actually ended up being like the focus on the Winnipeg development and a development in Barrie, which I spent a lot of time looking at what were massive red flags with those developments in particular. That's what the RCMP focused in on, is those two developments. And they ultimately ended up raiding their offices 2018.
Yep, 2018.
Charging them with fraud 23, 24. Like everything moves slowly.
But once the cops stepped in, somehow at that moment that the RCMP stepped in, suddenly Fisco decided they could shut the brokerages down.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
By some miraculous coincidence. Yeah, at that moment.
Then they had the guts.
Look at us. We're going to find these guys. We got $1 million out of them. Well, they'd taken $400 million from people. And, come on. And which nobody knows where the fuck. There's probably $350 million. Nobody knows where it went. Okay?
Well, this is, I guess, my frustration in the whole thing. And so they end up getting charged. They go to trial. We just got the verdict a couple weeks ago. Guilty. The particular charge that they've been found guilty on has a minimum 2-year prison sentence attached to it. Yeah. So that we'll get the sentencing next month. But I guess...
But they're in appeal.
They'll appeal. So it'll take a while. But ultimately, if they lose the appeal, they will spend some time in jail. But I guess where I land on it is... I mean, I don't know where you think or what you're hoping the outcome will be, but I'm expecting they'll get something like 5 years. They'll serve 1.5 or 2 years. They'll get out on good behavior. And I believe both of them have walked away with 9 figures. Yep. $100 million each, probably. Somewhere in that ballpark.
And any restitution order will be unenforceable.
100%. I can vouch for that. Yep. Yeah. And so I guess, am I wrong in thinking that if you pulled this bullshit in the US, you'd be going away for decades?
30 years.
This is what I'm talking about. So Canada...
30 years, and they would just start wandering around, seizing your houses. Oh, it's in your wife's name?
Too bad.
Fuck that.
We're in a numbered company that you own?
Yeah. We're going to start looking for your accounts in Dubai and in Switzerland and everywhere else. We're going to nail you to the cross, okay?
This is what is so goddamn frustrating about Canada, is we are so soft. Who wouldn't make this trade? If you know that you're going to, at the end of the day, do 2 years maybe, and walk away with $100 million.
18 months in minimum security.
It's crazy, man. Like this is what I'm talking about. So what's the downside to doing this sort of shit? If we don't get serious in Canada about tackling white collar crime, this is what we're dealing with.
Oh, it's constant. I mean, we could go on, but this is a bad one. This is a bad one, and this was one we were intimately involved with. The regulator failed so miserably Fisco, they shut it down.
Yep.
Everybody should know this. There's a new mortgage regulator, FSRA, and they let every living soul in the management group at the old regulator go. We don't give a shit who you were. Here's your pay. Get out of here. You're gone. We're going to even rename the place. We're so embarrassed. We're so goddamn embarrassed by what a shitty job you did. You're all fired, and we're going to create a new regulator, and nobody's joining from the old one. Okay. And I'll say this, in the new regulator, nobody's perfect, and they have to function under guidelines that are not always we could ask for better guidelines, but they're trying. Like, they actually are finding people. Harold, the mortgage closer, lost his license. Now, it was blatant. Okay, there's some blatant stuff, but they've been suspending people's licenses. They've been doing rational audits. They've been trying their best under not a perfect regulatory system, because none of them are. So
I have no doubt it's underfunded. They're probably overworked, undermanned, but
all that stuff. Yeah,
all that stuff's true. You just can't fuck up a file that's this blatant. Like, it was. Look, I'm on the outside of the mortgage industry, and I could figure out with a little bit of work where the fraud was, what it looked like, where all the red flags were, enough so that I could turn something over the RCMP. And I had no ability to compel disclosure on their part.
No.
But the regulators did. They were warned about it, and they just completely they whiffed on it.
I'll give you the final craziness. This was like the third meeting with Anatole. The third meeting with Anatole face-to-face was, Ron, you've got to understand something. They are using independent legal advice on every single signing now.
Yeah.
So that stopped me for a second. I said, okay, fine. And then, boom, 3 months later, wait a minute, it's all the same lawyer.
Yep.
It's all the same lawyer who's doing this supposedly independent representation.
Yep.
But wait, there's more.
I know where you're going.
Fortress is paying the lawyer. Okay. Fortress is paying the independent lawyer, which is illegal.
Yep.
It's completely illegal. So, regulator, wouldn't you ask a couple more fucking questions, for God's sakes?
Yep.
Okay, you're getting everybody signing with their own lawyer. Who is this lawyer? Oh, it's this lawyer. Well, wait a second. They all have the same lawyer? Yeah, because we gave it to them.
They were literally
paying for this thing. I mean,
they were literally advertising, Ron. Like, Fortress was advertising free independent legal advice.
Free independent legal advice.
If you're a regulator,
it's illegal. It's illegal. And the only organization that's paid so far is that law firm and LawPro.
That's right.
The insurance company, because they lost. The Law Society lost. You're right. This is completely illegal, what these guys are doing. So we got to pay some. Now, they don't pay all. They pay a bit because they got limits. But that's what happened.
There's, I hope that there is eventually a class action against the regulator that succeeds.
It's
in the motion. I've been cross-examined on that, which was really interesting, because the lawyer that's cross-examining me is like, well, did you realize that Fisco had to regulate this many different entities? Like, man, I don't give a fuck. Like, I
was in discovery on that too.
Okay, so
right? Discovery. Same thing.
Same bullshit.
Do you understand the volume of business they had to monitor?
Exactly what they hit.
I said, well, why are you asking me these questions? I told the man 4 times who's in charge of it that this is dirty. Like, why do you keep asking me this?
Right.
I don't think you have the right attitude, Mr. Butler. I mean, could you please tell your client to tell the lawyer who's doing this on our side, who's doing the discovery, could you please instruct your client that he has to take a calmer approach? I mean, like, holy shit.
Man, the gall.
Man, it's incredible.
It's wild.
All right, so the next really, really interesting subject that we got to tackle. And by the way, that's a story that we're going to stick with us for our lives, that Fortress story. Like, gross fraud, ignored by regulator, completely victim. And one last thing to everybody who's listening and watching. These people harmed investors in incredible ways. The most poignant story, and there's many of them, there's hundreds and hundreds of them, life savings of elderly people. A couple who the husband had been so seriously injured in a workplace accident that he would never walk again. He was in a wheelchair for life. He took a large settlement from the WSIB. At the time, WSIB, they have a new name now, WSB. Anyway, big settlement, $1 million. At the time, years ago, that was a lot of money. And he was conned by, and he didn't really speak English. Mm-hmm. And he was conned by a person it's investment advisor working within that language group to put every goddamn cent into Fortress.
Awesome.
Lost every penny.
The Globe and Mail included their story in one of the Globe and Mail's done some good work. They had a couple of excellent expose, and I know the couple you're talking about, and they were included in one of those. It's heartbreaking. It's so frustrating. You feel powerless when the regulators are asleep at the wheel, but
you do. Anyway, next important topic, which is something that you have been leading the way on too in your analysis, often missed by other people doing the analysis, and also a confusing subject because you get totally contradictory information put out into the world, which is, where is Canada's population actually going? So you're one of the first people to point out the total fucking insanity of the students, of the poor foreign students.
Speaking of fraud, Ron.
Wow, I mean, and none of those college owners will ever go to jail. Again, white-collar crime, totally lying to recruiting foreign students to come here. And working the loophole, this is the loophole, folks, that if a school signs someone up to come to a course, the province rubber stamps it instantly, no look, no care. And then the federal government is forced by the rules to issue that visa. So all of a sudden, to Ben's point, and he was the first bird dog on this, how the fuck did we go from 173,000 students one year to 830,000 students the next year? How the fuck is that even possible? And none of them are, only the original 173,000 are going to university. That was a normal intake by like real universities teaching proper courses that would actually turn a lot of those students into marvelous members of Canada. Engineers, accountants, I mean, on and on.
Bright minds,
Doctors, okay? Like, seriously, all good stuff. And 600,000 two-year travel consultant degrees at fucking community colleges. Okay, you were one of the very, very first on it.
Man, I was banging the drum on this so hard. In fact, I was warning about this at a time where, remember, kind of the politics were such that it was considered very impolite to question anything around immigration.
You're racist. Yeah, you're racist.
And I remember I testified in front of the Standing Committee of Finance twice over this issue. And, the fraud around the international student component is significant, but the other big component, because we're talking now about a cohort that's broadly referred to as non-permanent residents. So they're here on a temporary basis.
So it's temp student, temp workers.
Those are the big two ones.
Temp workers.
The third group is asylum claimants that's rolled in there as well. But let's set that cohort aside because there's now fraud in that component too. But if you look at, we know the fraud around the students. Right, they were recruited by
agents overseas.
Who were in many cases made false promises around their prospects to get PR.
And those foreign agents got paid. Absolutely. We're not sure by who, but they got paid by somebody. Okay.
You had these quote unquote business colleges pop up above burger joints and strip malls. I mean, all this, as you would say, Ron, all this fuckery.
Total fuckery.
But secondarily, you've got this temporary worker cohort, and there's a lot of fraud there too. So for example, in order to bring in a temporary worker, a business has to prove that there's a need that they have that they could not meet within the local labor market.
No Canadian can do this.
Right. So, and that's called a labor market impact assessment. So it's a form you fill out, you submit to the government, almost 100% approval rating. They just take you at your word. But here's where it gets interesting. If you come to Canada under one of these labor market impact assessments as a temporary worker, when you later go to apply for your permanent residency, that is, it gets you considerable points towards that PR. So the way we allocate permanent residency in Canada is there's a point system. And so if you come here under a labor market impact assessment, it's a lot of points. So now all of a sudden, all these employers go, oh, wait, this is a valuable thing for people who want PR. We can sell that. So now if you are a worker coming to Canada, the employer will say, well, I'll let you work for me, but you got to pay me $25,000. So now, not only are you getting free,
fraud.
It's pure
fraud,
man. And not only are you then getting free labor, you're getting paid. And so this has now come out publicly. There's been a number of exposés on this.
Again, the crooked recruiters overseas.
Man, this is where it gets tricky. I don't know at what point you start. Like at some point, you need to hold people accountable. Like I'm
holding the Canadians accountable. But people wonder how do these people?
I think everybody involved.
Yeah, at some point there were crooked recruiters overseas.
100%, and the businesses ought to get smacked hard on this. Yeah. But all that to say, Ron, at one point in Canada, we had that cohort growing by 800,000 in a single year.
Jesus Christ.
And now if you think about it, if you come to Canada as a temporary worker or an international student, you're a renter. right?
For sure.
So another way of saying is we had 800,000. So imagine like 2 London Ontarios dropped into Canada, just renters in a single year. So of course the rental market went apeshit. Right?
And it did. It went absolutely nuts.
It was nuts. And so for a period of time there in 23, I guess late 22 to kind of early 24, we had population growth of 1.3 million. So we're talking 3%.
Nuts.
Unprecedented. We've never seen it.
No.
Strained all sorts of infrastructure in Canada. It was
never seen anything like it.
No. And I know you've said before, Ron, you and I share this agreement that we are in favor of sensible, thoughtful immigration policies.
Which we had. For decades. Okay.
Yes.
Like, I'll never forget the line out of the, one of the previous G7 meetings, and one of the European leaders was here and said, "You have the best immigration system in the world. Your taxi drivers are engineers. Like, seriously, you have the best people because the point system works." Yep. The point system, as it was constituted for many decades, worked. Yep. It worked. And by the way, let's just take a second out to really, I have to do this. There's just way too much garbage on social media about this stuff, okay? The craziness of people throwing stuff at Tim Hortons windows and all this shit, or saying that the whole country's being taken over. Don't do that. Do not fucking do that, okay? There has been, this is not about the people who were tricked into coming. It's just not, okay? Let's talk about the evildoers. Now, some of them were in their own communities. Let's face it. Yep. Some of those business owners were harming their own communities, which is natural. Like, you always see that. You always see when the first group of people come over to a new country, that there's certain small number of them are going to take advantage of the next group of people who came in. That's pretty universal. But let's please not, one of the things we should not be doing in Canada is saying, oh, everything would be better if we just got rid of these people. Yeah, some of them are going. Some of them have left. Like, just get straight on this. Some of them have left. Some of them are applying. We'll talk about this more in a second. Some of them are applying for refugee status. That's got to be dealt with. But for the love of God, people, like, there's no need for mass deportation like the States is talking about, because they're going to leave on their own as soon as the refugees thing is sifted through. Nobody wants to work in this freezing cold country in the winter, try to stay here without legitimate ability to earn a living. Okay,
it is harder than people think. Staying here illegally is not easy.
Yes.
So I share your sentiment. I get the frustration from Canadians because we had broad consensus. That's one of the things that pisses me off is we had broad consensus around the kind of the support for thoughtful immigration.
Yes.
And we've completely ruined it.
Totally.
Right? And now, and Canadians don't make the distinction between permanent resident, non-permanent resident. To them, it's just all immigration, and it was just too much, and they're not wrong. They're not wrong. It was way too much.
Look, if we go back over the litany of mistakes the Trudeau government, the 9-year Trudeau government made, like the endless accumulation of bad policy, fucked up thinking, stupid moves, this immigration fiasco might be number one.
I totally agree with that.
Of a big pile of shit, it might be the top of the pile, okay?
Yep.
Because exactly as you said, harmed the economy, distorted the real estate market, and almost all of the people bringing in were being abused. Okay, they were the victims. Okay, and then strained the system, strained healthcare, strained everything, and for 2 years, Mark Miller told us we were stupid racists.
Yep, and Sean Fraser before him.
Yep.
No, it's crazy. Drove down wages for low income workers.
100%.
Drove up rents. So like, there's nothing good that came out of this,
and drove up certain real estate prices that are now cratering because people were buying, like six people would buy a 3,300 square foot house, brand new. They'd sign up at the sales shack to buy this big house, 6 different people, because they were going to put 16 futons in the house and rent to 16 students or 16 temp workers for $800 a month. And that was a viable idea. So you could pay whatever the fuck you wanted for that new house because you were going to extract like this astronomical amount of illegal rent. Okay, as a room, you're running as a rooming house. Worse than a rooming house. There were no rooms. People were just sleeping on the futons on the floor.
Crazy.
There was one kitchen, two bathrooms, 3 bathrooms for all these 16
kids
people.
sharing beds. Like it's crazy.
The worst of the worst. Okay, so now that particular segment is cratering in some respects. Okay, so the economic damage, the moral damage, off the fucking hook. Like, Mark Miller, Sean Fraser, fuck yourselves, okay?
100%.
So, because at the end of the day, when you say, people retreat and back, well, errors might have been made, we didn't know. Well, for fuck's sakes, if 1,000,003 people are coming in 1 year, you knew.
I reject that. I testified, God, I think the first time I testified was like 2021.
Yep.
And it was already clear to me that there was a problem coming in the pipeline in that temporary resident cohort. And at that time, we're talking about like, I think it was growing 100,000 a year. It went 8x from there before they finally addressed it. Yeah. So if you fast forward then to today, what's happened and you have to give them at least some credit for trying to fix the mess. They have really clamped down on international students. They've really put in some strong restrictions around temporary workers. And when they did that, and when I read those regulations and what they were intending to do, it was very clear to me that this would have a huge impact on the future growth trajectory of Canada's population for at least the next couple of years. In fact, their own estimates would show that we would have a couple of years where population growth would go pretty close to zero, simply as a function of those temporary residents leaving the country. So we would still continue to bring in permanent residents, but you'd have a negative.
But the permanent residents often are already here. They're here. They came in under a normal process, whether they were the temp workers we wanted who were doing engineering, or they were the students that are going to become doctors, and they became permanent residents.
Yes.
So but they were here for 4 years or 6 years or whatever it was, and now so that's why you can see an increase in permanent residents, people becoming permanent residents when there's actually no new people coming in.
That's right. I made that point. At one point, we had 3.5 million temporary residents in the country.
Jesus Christ.
So if you look at the time, we've dropped our PR admissions down to roughly, call it 400,000 a year. Yep. So that's the target. So you do some simple math. You say, well, you have 3.5 million people in the country here on a temporary basis. If we allocated all the PR slots to them, you're talking 9 years of filling your PR slots without increasing Canada's population by one person. Because all you're doing is shuffling the categories.
But to your point, some of them have to go home.
I 100% agree. So look, the high level thinking is very simple. Canada's population is going to slow sharply. So I started banging that drum pretty loudly because that has implications for the rental market, has implications for anyone that's kind of volume, like call the telco companies that are priced off of their kind of user growth.
That was the report that I keep talking about, how brilliant you found this report. Net new cell phone signups.
Yep.
And you said, look, it's gone to nothing. It's zero. So that means there's no more new people coming.
So this is the thing is Stats Canada started to report this big slowdown in Canada's population. Still growing, but it's like growing by less and less and less each quarter. And in fact, in the most recent quarter, it was basically flat, right? And you've got people on Twitter that are going, no, that's bullshit. They're bringing in 800,000, like all these insane, stupid numbers from people who don't understand what they're talking about. And you look at that and you go, well, let's corroborate this with real world data. And you can look at, to your point, the user growth for cell phones at these telcos, and it's dropped to zero. Yeah. Right. You can look at the occupancy rate and REITs.
It'll eventually go negative.
Yeah, I think so. So that's where we're going. So you can corroborate this. There's no question that Canada's population is slowing. In fact, if you look in at Ontario specifically, it printed a negative quarter for the first time in 70 years.
Some people are leaving the province. It's as simple as that.
People moving to Alberta. You got temporary residents leaving. And so that's going to be
they're leaving for sure. They're leaving.
Yeah, 100% they're leaving.
But a little bit of a hiccup on the refugee side, which I know you can explain.
Yeah, so there's a lot. It's like a whack-a-mole of fraud with and that's what pisses me off. Is I've just made the statement that our immigration system has just become deeply dishonest, which is so disappointing to see because we were attracting the best and the brightest, and now there's just too much goddamn fraud. And and it feels like every time they whack one program, the fraud just migrates. And so now what we're seeing is. Immigrate. So if you come here as a temporary resident and your visa is about to expire, one of your options is to say, well, I can't go home because I'll be persecuted. I'm going to make a claim, a refugee claim on some grounds. And so where we see that is within the data, there's a cohort that is inland refugee claims. Oh. So that's people who are already in the country on a temporary basis that are then filing for asylum. And that has absolutely, it looks like a hockey stick, just gone parabolic. And so that to me is a very clear sign that as the feds were trying to tighten up these programs, people were going, I know what I'll do. I'll just say all of a sudden, I just discovered that I'm gay and I'm from a country where that's frowned upon. And if you send me back, it's like you hear these crazy stories, right? Mm-hmm. And so they come up with a reason to say, hey, I need to stay. So what the government has just announced, and then we're talking like a couple days ago, is they basically said, look, if you were in Canada and you didn't file or didn't put in a refugee claim within a year of being here,
you're out.
You don't get a chance to claim it.
You're out.
You don't get to discover a year later that, hey, you're from you're some regime that's...
You're a persecuted group.
Right. You don't get to all of a sudden stumble on that reality. And they've made that retroactive back to I think it was 2020. So they're saying if you applied previously, but that rule applied, you're ineligible.
So let's and by the way, you and I see it consistently in falling rental rates in Ontario. Because let's face it, the biggest impacted provinces, Ontario, at one point, in 1 year, there was 500,000 immigrants came to Toronto. 500,000.
Yes, crazy.
Came to Toronto, came to Ontario. Okay. A lot of them in Toronto. BC got the next biggest group and Alberta following. Okay. So, because a lot of people don't know this, and I'm going to do a whole series on this thing because it fascinates me. In Quebec, they get to decide how many immigrants come. Nobody else in Canada has a choice. Every other province, wherever they land, that's you. Okay. In Quebec, it's 50,000. But, big but, they're just passing legislation to reduce that number to 25,000. Mm-hmm. And under some changes they're making to seal off refugees at the border, because they did have to accept refugees. Refugees have to be accepted whatever port of entry they appear. Okay. So they're making moves to make sure that's reduced. They're going to go down to this infinitesimal 25,000 net new immigrants a year. We're going to start to draw some relationships between the price of homes in Quebec, which is radically less than everywhere else, except the Maritimes and Saskatchewan. We're going to start to draw some relationships. Why are the homes in British Columbia 79% more expensive than the average price in Quebec? Let's start thinking about those things. I'm going to do a little series on that, but that's important to understand, folks. In the province that has, it's a big province, 7 million people, over 7 million people in Quebec. In a big province with a big city and a couple of other minor cities, house prices, very low. Immigration, well, very low compared with everybody else. They're pretty expensive compared with Texas, but they're still very low compared with all other major cities in Canada, and very small immigration. Yeah. So we've got to start thinking about this stuff in real world thoughts, which brings us to this reduction. And by the way, that's another point. You and I see the correlation of fewer people in Canada, immigration going to zero, in rent rates.
Absolutely.
As that, it's just cratering. I mean, folks, you might think your rent's expensive. And I know some people are saying, you're stupid. I'm paying a fortune for my semi here, or I'm paying a fortune for this condo. Guess what? When your lease is up, just look around.
Yes.
Okay. You will get 2 months free rent. You will get lower rent. It's
100%
epidemic. Okay. Yep. And based on what we've just been talking about in terms of population, that's going to get worse, isn't it?
100%. So again, I mentioned that you had 800,000 temporary residents in 1 year. They're all renters. So if you just draw, I've got a great chart. I put it on Twitter, but I sent it to you if you want to put it in the show notes or whatever. But you can see year-over-year growth in temporary residents versus year-over-year growth in rents. They're right on top of each other.
Right there.
It's one and the same.
Right there.
Right. So we know what drives rents. We know that the feds are now targeting a decline in the non-permanent resident cohort. And that, by the way, that just happens to coincide with a record number of rental units in the construction pipeline, and not by a little bit, but by a massive amount. So we were talking at lunch run, I've done the math on this. You've got almost 7% of the existing rental stock in the construction pipeline, which is to say that over the next couple of years, as these rental units are completed, the amount of rental units in the country will expand by 7% into an environment where rental demand may be negative. So it's not hard to see that you're going to see a considerable increase in vacancies and definitely some declining rents in certain pockets. I've been worrying about this for over a year now, because you could see this was as clear as day that this was the trajectory. And here we are.
That just to recap for the listeners and the viewers, it's like we're increasing the amount of available rental stock in an entire country. But by the way, it's concentrated in certain areas.
Big time.
They're not exploding the rental inventory in Winnipeg. Right? It's up. Sure, it's up, but it's up, in a very calm and reasonable way. It's up in terms of historic increases. It mirrors 10-year increases, okay? What we're talking about in certain areas where this rental, purpose-built rental programs driven by CMHC MLS Select program, a lot of different reasons. In some cases, developers just saying, well, I don't have anything to do now. I can't build condos, so let me try rentals.
Yep.
So 7%, not spread out perfectly evenly across Canada.
Not at all.
Not at all. Focused on cities, focused on big metro areas. So it's more like, for those places, it's more like 10 or 11%. But listen carefully, folks, of the entire rental stock period growing. Okay, it's a massive change.
Well, let me put numbers to it. So the three areas that I would look at as being most concerning: Atlantic Canada's got 12%. 12% of their existing rental stock under construction.
Whoa.
And by the way, guess what their population growth has been over the last 2 quarters? 0. And that's an area of the country where we've regularly seen declining population. So keep an eye on Atlantic Canada. The second is actually BC. Now, a lot of the rental stock is condos, so you set that aside. But as it relates to primary rental stock, purpose-built rentals, 12%.
Oh, man, that's big.
And then Alberta is 10%. And what's interesting in Alberta is we're already finding, CMHC had great data that on newly completed apartment buildings, they already have a 7% vacancy rate.
Whoa.
So this is this is what I mean. You will see considerable rent declines in some of these areas that have been overbuilt.
So this is something that I've been touching on recently in our podcasts and in our videos, is that there are actually, as it is with everything, there are cracks developing in certain product categories in Alberta. Alberta's still doing good. They're building some houses.
Yeah, prices are coming down now.
Prices
finally.
are coming. Yep. Yeah, but the amazing thing is, the condo virus that metastasized in Toronto, a little bit pretty ill in Vancouver, it crept into Calgary. It crept, and it was people from Toronto and Vancouver who were buying up investment condos, and the same results will apparently occur. And they do things a lot differently out there. Like we run into all kinds of situations where we find that the developer has these odd rights to turn places into rentals instantaneously. Like you don't have to, you can have a certain number of condominiums, you can form the condominium corp, but the developer just expects to retain 20% of the building as rentals. So wait a second, how the fuck does that work? I'm competing with the guy who built the building? I think his costs were a little lower, right? His costs were not as...
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
We run into it all the time because some lenders are pushing back. Some lenders are saying, wait a minute, this is one of those fucking buildings where there's all this melange of rental, like a company, like a development company owning a rental company, and there's rentals in the condo, and there's also ownership in the condo, and we don't like that mix. I mean, it's just, is this a commercial building? Is this, what is this really? It's not the traditional bottom floor to top floor is a condo corp. Okay, it's all condo corp. That's not what always happens in Alberta. So it's creating some pushback. They do weird shit about right of first refusal too. Like, it's really weird. Alberta is kind of like, I love Alberta. I lived in Alberta for 6.5 years. Okay, so met my wife there. So I love Alberta, but at the end of the day, and it's one of the reasons it's had such great ability to create housing stock quickly is because it's Alberta, because it's a pro-business province, okay? And believe me, folks, that helps a lot. It helps a lot not to be just completely deluged with regulation that chokes you off.
Absolutely.
So that part's great, but it does sometimes lend to like odd business designs that come up at the end, okay? But at the end of the day, we're going to see some rental fall off in Alberta. Your numbers are fascinating on British Columbia. All this rental stock. Oh my God. Like, now we were it's fair to say we didn't have enough purpose-built rental. That's fair.
That.
Okay?
Yeah. At one point we hit like a 1% vacancy rate in most of the big metros, which is almost nothing.
But this is the most incredible, disastrous timing. We're pushing out all this huge amount of rental stock at precisely the same time that the rental condominium market, the investor condominium market in Toronto and in Vancouver is in the most sorry state that you could ever imagine. It's literally a financial disaster unfolding before our eyes. And this just contributes to it.
100%.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it's funny. There's never just one thing. When things go wrong in the real estate market, it's like everything goes wrong at once, which is unfortunate.
I called it the perfect storm.
That's a great way to put it.
A few videos back, I said, this is literally the perfect storm. Massive rental stock increase, population decline that nobody really understood was declining,
Yep.
Rental rates falling, more units coming on the market than ever before in history if condominiums would have to form. Development corporations having to keep inventory that people refuse to close, and eventually they will sell those at discounts, severe discounts,
Yep.
to what everybody else in the condominium building closed at. It's a perfect storm of insanity. At the end of the day, pity the consumer. A lot of people are mad at condo buyers. Whenever I put out any piece on the Condo Crash, there's always at least 12 to 20 comments like, fuck them, the greedy bastards. Yep. Fuck them. They deserve everything that happens to them. But let me tell you something real. If you're one of the ones it's happening to, it's fucking financial catastrophe.
Yep.
It's a catastrophe in your life, okay? Because I'm telling you, I'm old. I know people who got into this mess in 89, 90 in Ontario. I was here. And it crippled them for 20 years. Yep. They bought stuff they had to give up, lose money on. Some of them had to go bankrupt. It ain't fun when it happens.
I was talking to somebody last week who was telling me that they had a condo owner approach them looking for a mortgage on a unit that was underwater by $300,000.
Yep.
And then they asked a few more questions, and it turned out, that's only one of the three
that are
They're all three of them are underwater by hundreds of thousands. So these guys are looking at close to $1 million in losses on those three condos, which is awful.
So let's talk about another subject that you and I both think about a lot is the weird world of blanket appraisal.
Mm-hmm.
So just to recap, the idea of a blanket appraisal is the banks who lent money to the developer to build the project. It's normally a syndicate, but there's always a lead, okay? A lead bank on the syndicate. And then we're talking big money here, $300, $400 million, $500 million, $500 million for three tower project. They also supply mortgages to the people who buy the condominium. So who put deposits down 6 years ago, 5 years ago. Those people are now needing a mortgage to be able to fulfill their obligation, complete the contract, and buy the condominium. It's built now, got to pay up, got to get a mortgage. So those development banks, they're the big six banks, those banks. Less Scotia, though. It's interesting. Scotia was not as heavily involved as others. So those banks suddenly say, well, looks like you paid $1,400 a square foot for this unit. You paid $1 million for 625 square feet. If you're having any trouble with appraisal for your mortgage, just come see us, because we have a blanket appraisal. We have a couple of opinions from appraisers that say it's worth exactly what you paid for it.
Yep.
Now, if you're dealing with another bank or a credit union or anybody else, when they appraise it, they say, nope, it's worth $300,000 less. Okay, like it is not worth what you paid for it.
$1,000 a foot. Yeah, units across the street selling for $1,000. Yep.
And it's been in the paper. It's been publicized. There's been CBC specials on it. There's been this endless talk about, well, wait a minute, like it's definitely worth less. And then the developer says, go talk to so-and-so bank. Go talk to this bank, and they have a blanket appraisal, and it will help you close. But obviously, that's not really what the place is worth, okay? Now, you and I have similar opinions on this, but with a little bit of a twist, that we both agree that it's in the favor of the bank.
Yep.
That it's good for that development bank not to have one big $400 million problem, but get their development loan off their books when all the condos close. They help the condos close. They help in other ways too. There's something called an inventory loan that we're wondering about. So there's two different phases of how banks are assisting their condo developers to close. But is it honest? Like, is because in reality, isn't it worth $300,000 less?
Yeah. So you're right. You and I share concerns around this. We both recognize it from a pure credit perspective. If you were the bank, you'd do the same thing. Nobody wants to have to go to their investors and say, we've got to take an impairment on a $200 million loan.
And you and I also suspect that the regulators like the idea too. They won't, you'll never hear it. You'll never hear about it, but I think they do.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting that they haven't clarified. They haven't issued any guidance on what the bank should do, which is crazy.
Yeah.
Because just to be really clear for the listeners, you are talking about banks putting uninsured loans on their balance sheet that are being disclosed at sub 80% loan to value, but in actuality are over 100% of the fair market value.
Yeah, they're 106% loan to value. Yeah.
Right. Now, that is in violation of the Bank Act, full stop. And OSFI has to give some guidance on that. And yet they have been completely silent.
Except, as I said in the past, and I have to say it because
here's the disagreement.
Occasionally I'm an expert witness on these things. I know this from case law. An appraisal is an opinion.
I get it.
That's all an appraisal is. It's an opinion. And if the banks have found 2 or 3 appraisers who've all agreed that, yeah, we really think our opinion is that it's worth what you paid for it, it's not breaking the law. But we have so many critical examples. We have people buying in the same building, using a credit union, getting to provide a mortgage. The credit union appraises the unit and says, "You're nuts. It's not worth $1 million. It's worth $625." Yeah. I've had it myself. Like another bank sends it, not one of the lead banks who's providing blanket appraisals, but we've had a bank who said, "Yeah, appraisers just come back. It's $1.1 million. He says it's worth $722." Okay, like what the fuck? Okay, yep. So there's so many repetitive instances of this. And the worst offense is this, that when the condo corp closes and the development loan is paid and the builders had to keep multiple units because a lot of people just couldn't get a mortgage, period, because they didn't even expect to ever do them. They thought they'd sell by assignment. Yep. They never thought they'd ever need a mortgage, okay? And they didn't close. They refused to close. Builder kept their deposits. And 6 months after the dust has settled, or 5 months or whatever, the builder starts offering the units they had to keep because they wouldn't close for 25% less money.
Yep.
To get them off their books and solve their balance sheet issue. Okay. What the fuck was that? Okay.
Yeah, you run into a couple issues here. Well, one is I guess as Canadians, we should rightfully take some pride in the fact that our regulators have done an excellent job at navigating some crises in the past. Mm-hmm. Like Canadian banks skated through the financial crisis really well. There was
a little bit of a backdoor bailout.
Yeah, there was, but by and large, we emerged mostly unscathed. The B20 regulations, with the benefit of hindsight, were brilliant on the part of OSFI, in spite of the fact that
made sense. Yeah,
it saved a lot of people. So we have thoughtful regulators in this country, and the Bank Act has served Canadians very well in terms of protecting our financial institutions from really stupid mistakes. And I just feel like what we are allowing these banks to do undermines some of the confidence that we have in these institutions. So, for example, our banks trade relatively richly priced on a global basis when you look at them on a price-to-book basis. Mm-hmm. And part of that is an assumption that the banks are truthful and honest in their disclosure that their uninsured loan book is something like 60% loan to value in aggregate.
That they're prudent, honest, and give full disclosure.
Right. Now, what we learned, if we draw some learnings from the Home Capital Group fiasco, there were never any credit losses at Home Capital.
Not one.
But the moment that the markets no longer trusted management and started to question the value of the book, the deposits fled, and all of a sudden you end up in this self-fulfilling negative loop. And I don't think there's upside for these Canadian banks to be screwing around with the reputation that they've earned rightfully on the global stage by being managed prudently, by doing this fuckery where they're pretending that a loan is sub 80% loan to value, but it's going on their book at 106%. Now, I know that we could argue, like, from legally, they have the grounds to do it because, okay, whatever, but let's be honest.
Risk management.
Let's be honest. That is bullshit. And if you are a global investor buying these Canadian banks on the assumption that the balance sheet disclosures are accurate, this is not going to sit well with you, this sort of fuckery.
But I'm agreeing with you. Let's make it clear I'm agreeing with you. But if you look under the hood, if you're that global investor, you're saying, well, this is transferring a $500 million risk into $500 million risk. Sure. And some of them paid cash. So it's really only about $350 or $375, and some of them are paying properly or afraid not to pay, and if we wait long enough, the values may go up, and so it may all come out in the wash.
Yeah.
Okay. And what it also tells you clearly is that Canadian government, the bank regulator, the Bank of Canada are all confident in their ability to bail out banks, to make sure that nothing does go wrong. So if I'm an international investor, I think I'm kind of intrigued by that issue as well.
Well, that's fair. I distinctly remember this phrase coming up over and over again in the home capital issue is people were saying there's never just one cockroach. Once you lose confidence in management that what they're telling you is honest, you start questioning everything. I don't see the upside. Like at a minimum, Ron, what I would suggest is we need OSFI to come out and to issue guidance on this. We need them to say, yeah, we understand this is happening. This is a temporary measure because of the crisis in the condo market. Here's how we expect banks to provision against these loans because they're clearly offside, X, Y, Z, and at least lay out their thinking. And they have been goddamn silent, which is crazy.
Totally silent. I'll say one more thing, and just one more thing, is that the regulator and the government also understand clearly that this is a short time situation. We're going to clear through all of this condo madness within 18 months. Within 18 months, they'll all be built. They'll all be finished. There's no new ones going up, like zero, none. Hasn't been a high-rise condo development start in the TREB system, GTA, for 16 months. It's dead as a doorknob, okay? So they know that once they're all finished, there'll be some fallout and some gradual decline, but I got a feeling the regulator believes the market will eventually heal itself because, now, I'm not saying it will. I'm not that, as we both agree, prediction is a shit business, okay? But I think that they feel there's a timeline that's short. It's not infinite. I'm not trying to pretend I know what the regulator's thinking, but here's what you and I both know. They haven't said shit so far. And they sure as hell know about it. There's been all kinds of news articles and media articles and social media stuff about blanket appraisals, and they haven't said a word so far. And again, as far as I'm concerned, if a bank sees a risk mitigation tool available to them, even though what really pisses me off is it's bad for the consumer, bad for the borrower. It's horrible for the borrower. But for the banks, it makes sense.
I don't disagree. It makes sense. You got to have clarity from the regulators. But,
agreed. Yeah. I mean, one thing you and I endlessly agree on is, even though it's the easy way out to not go after white collar crime, to not seek out fraud, to not have an effective group of crowns and investigators, to not have to not feel bad when the average borrower gets chewed to bits. Okay. What we've all both agree on is there is some fundamental fucking unfairness going on here, like really significant unfairness. And if you want to live in a great country, if you want to live, because the Canada that I was brought up in really fucking believed in fairness. There's also a little bit of a Laurentian elite bullshit going on. Government looked after business pretty good, but it wasn't like fundamentally crooked that the government was working us over. But these things about bringing in 3 million people in 2.5 years, all this shit that we've gone through, that's a fairness issue.
Yeah, totally agree.
And let's face it, if anybody to this day, because we brought in so many people in Ontario, British Columbia, and Alberta, if you want to go if your relative or yourself needs some help in an emergency ward, you're going to the 7th fucking circle of hell. And that's another symptom of 3 million people in 2.5 years. Okay. Fairness is what we need. And we're not always getting fairness, which is dead fucking wrong.
Can I ask you something that's kind of tangentially related here? So, it feels like our regulators will sometimes allow things that are questionable in the name of kind of preserving stability in financial and housing markets. And I say that to kind of flag an issue that you've been a champion on, Ron, to your credit, which is this whole issue around mortgage document fraud. And I know we're not necessarily have to chase.
That's a whole episode, yeah.
Let me ask you one quick question on it, though. So the industry that represents, the industry group that represents folks like you has submitted to the government that this is something they desperately need, which is 100%. Direct income verification. Yep. And what I struggle with is, this is clearly an issue. There's a simple solution.
Which we absolutely know mechanically and have outlined, have described, correct. and like you, I've been before the Standing Committee in Parliament of Finance to say we can solve this effortlessly. It's one simple thing.
Right. And the U.S. has had it for 20 years.
Yep.
So there's no excuse here. It's a simple line of code.
No
but so I guess that raises an interesting question, and I'd love to get your take on this. In my mind, it's one of two things. Either number one, the regulator believes it's such a trivial, non-significant issue that it's not worth even a modicum of attention. Or two, it's too big an issue in that the horses kind of left the barn. And if you bring this in now, you risk destabilizing. To me, it has to be one of those two. I'd love to get your thoughts.
So factually, the destabilization issue is something that the financial institutions don't think about. Financial institutions would rather not have mortgage fraud. Like, I mean, people say, no, you're lying, Ron, you're just protecting them. No, shit. I go to a bar, I have drinks with them. The people who are the leadership group, they don't want mortgage fraud. They got reputational risk. You ask TD. Reputational risk is a far bigger fucking problem than getting support from some fucking mortgage fraud. We don't want reputational risk. We don't want problems. We don't want fraud. But the regulator side of it is, and I'll tell you frankly, the regulator, OSFI, Peter Rutledge, he has fobbed off this thing as meaningless. We've reviewed this mortgage fraud stuff. It's just not a meaningful issue, okay? We believe the banks are doing a great job. Even though the banks would love to have the tool. They'd love to have the digital linkage. They're fine with it. Everybody's fine with it. Nobody's crazy. Fighting it. So I would tell you that in this particular case, this is the same old story of bureaucratic fuckery, okay? Like if you turn something over to CRA just to start fresh, you're fucked. They'll take 2 years just to think it through. Okay? That's
crazy.
It is crazy. Ben, thank you. It's been a great episode. It's fantastic. You bring so much real insight. Like the story behind the story, the man behind the curtain, like what's really going on. So thank you. Appreciate it. I know it's a long schlep. You come from St. Catharines or something. So thanks again. It was great having you. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron.
If you like the pod, well, don't just sit there. Go to YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and all the other ones and like the pod. And don't forget to subscribe so we can keep being angry at mortgages and swearing about mortgages. Angry Mortgage could use your support.